You can only learn so much about a railroad by studying its history or following its operations. If you want to understand what the railroad is and what it means, you have to talk to the people, the employees who make it happen day in and day out. Railroaders aren't polished TV stars. They're real people with real stories to tell. If you take the time to listen, you'll find what gives the railroad its character, and you'll get to know some fine people. Railroading has always been a family affair. Brothers, cousins, sons, and grandsons carry the legacy for 2, 3, or more generations.
Probably in the 20s, the late 20s, my dad was the first one to hire out on the road as far as I knew. And his brother, my Uncle Ralph, wanted to hire out. And so my dad lied his age and made himself a year older so that my Uncle Ralph could hire out. And then, as I remember, I had a cousin Wayne that hired out, and then his brother Keith hired out, and I was the last to work on the road.
Are any of them still working?
Keith is working out of Wisconsin Rapids on a yard engine.
Starting on my father's side, my father was an engineer. His brother worked in the roundhouse. With my descendants, my oldest son Joe is an engineer brakeman. My second son Gregory had worked as a laborer some years. And then on my mother's side, my great-grandfather apparently helped build the railroad out there about 100 years ago. And then several of his sons, including my grandfather, worked in the railroad in the capacity of conductors, engineers, maintenance of way, roundhouse. And then continue on my mother's side, and several of her brothers were engineers. 3 of her brothers were engineers. And then also a few cousins. Yeah, the Green Bay and Western has always been a sort of a family railroad, and even the McGee tradition carried it on.
The GBW was a small, friendly railroad, almost an extended family.
What was it like working for Homer McGee?
It was just a feeling of security. It was a family railroad. You knew it was well run and working very well, and you were happy and proud to be part of it.
Was he on the property a lot? Was he out talking to people?
Quite a bit. He'd once in a while stop and talk and usually offer people a cigar. Very beautiful cigar in a foil wrapper. Very good cigars.
What was it like working for Weldon? Was there a lot of difference between Weldon and his dad?
Some difference. The main difference, the only flaw Weldon ever had, Weldon was not a smoker, so he never gave me a cigar. But otherwise, aside from that, there was absolutely no drop-off at all. There was, and Weldon is just an absolute gentleman. It was a pleasure working for him, too. The saying behind every great man, there's a great woman, that applies there. I mean, I met his wife several times, and that's probably one of the things that make Weldon such a fine person.
With Weldon, it was fantastic. He was a real gentleman, and always knew everybody's name, and he was just as concerned about from the top to the bottom individual on the railroad. He knew them all. He treated them real well. And as far as I was concerned, he was an outstanding gentleman to work for, and the vast majority of the people on the railroad that I worked with felt the same way about Weldon McGee. Just an #1 individual.
Mr. McGee knew everyone on the railroad's name. When he walked through the shops, he would walk through the shops and call everyone by name. And after you worked here for 6 months, he knew your name. He'd walk through the shop and say hello to you. It was like working in one big happy family.
Well, with very few exceptions, I look back on the relationship with our employees as being a most pleasant thing. We had a fine group of people. Just like in any organization, there are exceptions, and you deal with those problems. But overall, it was a fine group of people.
You always had the idea in the Green Bay and Western that the top people were looking out for you. They cared for you. Now, probably we're spoiled, maybe just the way it is, industry or railroads all over them. Now, we know that no one really gives it for us. They just discard it like a broken wheel on an engine.
The railroad life is seldom easy. Working strange hours, in all kinds of weather, the nights spent away from home, all of these take their toll, especially for a family man. But the job has its rewards, too.
I guess I'm one of those people that's been very lucky. I've enjoyed coming to work every day for the last 20 years primarily, and I've raised 2 kids on it, and it's been good to me.
I like to see the countryside, especially in the fall when the geese are flying back south, and in the spring when they're back in the north. And it's changing scenery all the time, and I really enjoy it.
Frank Fitzgerald's enthusiasm for the GBW extends beyond his job.
This steam engine Harold comes off of the one of the 400 steam locomotives on the Green Bay Western that were here in the 40s. And it's only, I believe, 1 of 4 in existence, possibly 3 in existence that are left. If we go over here to the pictures on the wall, they were taken by some rail fans that lived in Independence, Wisconsin. Fred and Jan Hazer worked the West End for a year and a half, and a lot of these were taken at Independence and down the road in either direction. This builder's plate here is off of an Alco DL640 model RS-27. It's off the 317, built in March of 1962. Then the other builder plate here is off the 306 Alco model RS-3, and that was built in May of 1951. We still have the 306 running. They no longer call it a model RS-3. They put a 2,000 horsepower engine in. Have a lot of these HO Green Bay Western models. Most of them are Atlas. There's some MCR, I believe, is one of them. And they were all done and painted up by a fellow in Green Bay called Pete the Painter. He does a marvelous job. And except for these 2 up here, were done by Fred Hazer, Independence, Wisconsin, the 500s.
You want to talk about that picture, Kelly?
Yeah, I think I will. Yeah, maybe you can kind of zero in on that too. Sure. I want to say this is young. Who cares, you know? This was the youngest engineer ever to run a train on a Green Bay Western that I know of. This is my son Kelly when he was quite young, and he came along with us a few times on the night Kiwani job, and I'd let him put on my gloves, and he'd sit over there in the seat, and I'd stand there close to him and tell him when to draw off and when to blow the whistle. And we did that for a few minutes at a time, and he really enjoyed it, and he was a great kid.
What engine was that on?
317 or 18.
Did you have good relations with the brotherhoods during your years on the railroad? Did you ever have any labor management difficulties?
Oh yes, sure. We had. It was generally a normal relationship, but there were highs and lows, and there were tough situations, and I don't think any worse than some railroads, probably a lot better.
You toured the railroad, I was told, approximately once a month?
Oh yes, at least.
What kind of things did you look for as you were going along a railroad?
Well, you just try to keep in mind everything. You develop a sense to just automatically inspect track and all things, and talk to the employees and get ideas and notions they have, and it sparks ideas in your own mind.
So you firmly believed in being in the trenches with the guys who were running the freight trains? And
oh yeah, stay out on the railroad a lot, because that gives you the feeling of the whole operation.
Okay. Do you feel it's important for railroad upper management to have the skills, or at least have a feel of what it's like to be an engineer operating trains over the railroad?
Well, I think he should know something about some of the operating phases. He ought to know a little bit about all of it, but he certainly ought to go into considerable detail on a lot of the operations.